know if it's the battery or not, because I was having trouble with it frequently. You got a spare pair of double A's? I can give them back to you.
Yeah, just, give it a jam, see if that's the problem.
Because I thought I had a bad cord the other day. This is supposed to be a new cord.
Are in the right side though?
Yep. Straight out of the phone.
You are correct in the direction of the batteries.
Oh yeah. Let me triple check that. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, I think there's something wrong with it. Something wrong with it. Yeah, right? Like, especially this connection. That's all loose.
You should be seeing it.
Yeah, it shouldn't. Nope. It's lit up.
There you go. Mine just connection.
There it is. How you doing?
There?
No, the red one will turn off. And it'll like show a different color depending on how loud the mic is. Anyway.
Oh, you gave
Moral
it
of the story, fuck that.
You gave it a try.
Anyway, here's those.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks for that. Gonna have to. That's a week-long battle with management to get another one of those.
Yeah, right.
The something wrong with something. The wires. Could be the wire. Could be the IRA. Could be that.
It will. I'm old enough that I remember before I and then iPhone started to be like the default order. That came out before the English got I worked for CC, but Rackham was the same as and they
Just want to fix this.
now it's just insane to think that you could, but like, they were just gonna fix it, so we would have to take it out all the time.
It's the home decoration in here. Tell you what.
Do you drive or,
Yeah. There, that's good. And then it hangs straight at least. So yeah. Nice.
no, I'm like,
This is it's better than what I heard.
Exactly. Sorry. I scared you.
Precisely. It's just me.
5 minutes later.
No, 1 minute I would say. Maybe 30 seconds.
No, just kidding.
Good morning.
Okay, excellent. I think everyone who's here this morning has been here before, so I'll just say good morning and welcome to the Auditor General's news conference for school capital planning. The Auditor General has a prepared statement and then we'll take a few questions from the room. And thank you, we'll get organized with the post media. And we'll get Emily over to the left a bit for the eye contact.
Yeah.
And, excellent. All right. And now I'll present Auditor General Kim Adair. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Amy. So this morning, I filed a new report with the House of Assembly, an audit of school capital planning. It's the second time in the last decade we examined how the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development determines which major capital projects are recommended to go ahead. And these are major projects. Since 2018, government has approved $2 billion in school capital projects. Of this, about $1 billion, or half, relates to 9 schools approved in the last year. Our last audit on this topic was in 2016, and we found, overall, the department was doing a poor job of planning for new or renovated schools. A few years later, in response to that audit, the department announced its first multi-year capital plan and related process. So we wanted to check to see the outcome of the department's work, considering the significant taxpayer funds that go into school capital projects. What we found is the department did not include guidance in the process or even anticipate the need for new growth schools. When the multi-year plan was created in 2018-19, enrollment in Nova Scotia schools was stable. So the decision focus was on school closures. As a result, when we drilled into the details of the department's June 2023 announcement that 4 new growth schools would be built in Halifax, we were unable to follow how the decision was made. In addition, when the locations for these 4 new schools were announced over a year later, the department didn't follow the order of preference submitted by the Halifax Regional Centre for Education, or always consider the timing of upcoming housing developments. Now, 6 new Halifax area schools have been approved where there has been a 24% jump in student enrollment. In the short term, the department has spent $162 million on modulars and portables to accommodate up to 6,000 students. Our audit findings show new school decisions need to be backed with clear evidence to support such significant investments. For the other major capital projects, replacement schools and major renovations, there is a process. It includes a checklist of items you would expect to see when undertaking big capital projects, such as the project rationale and overview, condition of the existing school facility, a scan of any on-site modulars or portables, community impact, and a cost-benefit analysis. Our audit testing found submissions from the Regional Centers for Education for replacement schools and major renovations were supported by evidence of need, but the scoring process needs improvement. Submitted projects are reviewed and assigned a final overall score of low, medium, or high, but they aren't ranked in order of priority. This weakness was highlighted in 22-23 when 11 projects all scored medium, but only 2 were recommended to go ahead. And there was no evidence or explanation why these 2 were recommended over the other 9. So our audit includes 6 recommendations, including an update to the school capital planning process to have a business case supported by evidence, which includes enrollment projections, boundary reviews, and upcoming housing developments for all new growth schools. And on major renovations and replacement schools, we recommend going forward that there's clear rationale for advancing one major project over another. So the department has agreed to all of the recommendations and has a plan in place to start implementing them this year. I'd like to thank my staff for their work on this report and to the many civil servants across departments who help us carry out our audits. So I'd now be happy to take any questions.
Ms. Adair, are you satisfied with the responses from government that they will in fact address the recommendations that you've made?
I am satisfied that they have accepted the recommendations and will make improvements. Now 10 years ago when this audit was done, there were similar recommendations to create a plan, have a multi-year capital planning process, because at that time it was a very ad hoc process. It was a year-to-year process when they're making these major decisions. So it's positive that there is now a 5-year plan. However, we noted there's many weaknesses in the existing plan and room for further improvement.
How
shouldn't be that complicated. Many of the elements that go into replacement schools or major projects, those elements are the same. If it's a new growth school, such as enrollment projections, capacity of the other area schools, looking at should you redefine the boundaries, upcoming housing developments. Many of those factors are the same regardless of whether it's a new growth school or a major renovation or replacement school. So I don't think it should take a lot of work to refine their process.
Ms. Adair, you mentioned that there was a lack of rationale behind where these schools were being put. I'm just wondering if your office found or has any inclination as to whether these decisions were being made on a political basis, specific to conservative ridings.
So you raise a very good question, and I guess one of my major concerns is that because of the lack of evidence, the lack of process, the lack of consideration of all these factors that I just indicated, there's room for subjectivity in the decision-making process and or political influence. They should be evidence-based decisions. These are multi-million-dollar projects. A new school can be upwards of $100 million. Going to impact our students for decades ahead. It should not be a subjective process. It needs to be a very robust, evidence-based, supported in the process. It should be able to be followed by us doing our audits. And for taxpayers, right?
What evidence has the province used to make these decisions? Because I know in the audit you mentioned that they have sort of enrollment projection that appears to be good. How does that factor in and what are they missing?
Yeah, so we did look at the process for the enrollment projections, and the inputs to that process we found to be reasonable. However, the unanticipated growth following the pandemic kind of caught them off guard, I would say. The other factor driving the enrollment numbers is the rollout of the pre-primary program. So there is a focus on enrollment projections. However, there are many other factors which I've just mentioned that need to be considered into these decisions. So those are the elements that we're missing.
What was the enrollment projection the only evidence that they had that you could find?
So there is a mix. If I talk about the 6 new growth schools in the Halifax HRCE, the Halifax area, we did find one supported business case for the Timberley School, and that's articulated in the report. And when we said, so why do you have one for that school but not the other 5, we couldn't get any answer to those questions. Why did they announce in June 2023 that there would be 4 new schools when there were 7 areas of growth identified? We couldn't find out, well, why 4 and why in those areas? The concerning thing, if you read through this report, is the number of sentences where we state we could not get answers. They could not support the decisions. There was no evidence. And that's what I mean by it's just too subjective and not supported in the major decisions.
So I was going to say, are these plans then lacking in transparency, would you say? Is that the right way to address or to characterize it?
Yeah, I would say it's better transparency, better accountability, justification for the decisions.
Can you say
On
with the
that
benefit
point,
of-
sorry, just to follow up, has the province failed then since 2019 to account for this growth?
No, I wouldn't say they've failed to account for the growth. There's no question that the enrollment increases, particularly the 24% increase in the HRCE, the Halifax Regional Centre for Education, that there's need for new schools. They're housing up to 6,000 students right now in modulars and portables. So I wouldn't say it's a failure. It's just have the decisions for which schools go where and at what point in time been made in the right manner.
So according to your report, does the HRCE region need more than just portables and modulars? We need a long-term sustainable growth plan for schools here. And are we without that plan yet?
Yes, yeah. So there is a 5-year major capital project plan, but it needs to incorporate the new growth schools.
With the benefit of hindsight, can you say
So
when
the
you
lack
ask
of
the lack of evidence, sorry, just let me follow
Yeah.
up. The lack of evidence makes it impossible for you to say if they were good decisions?
No, I think you could only assess if it's a good decision after the schools are built and whether they're being utilized and the capacity is right, and that's a future audit perhaps. And
When you ask the department these questions, do you just get no answers, or they say, we're working on it, or?
yeah, so it's different answers at different times. I mean, we interviewed many people over a number of months, looked for documentation to support, and as indicated, there was just many areas that makes me very uncomfortable that they did not have the answers.
On the condition assessments for schools, you found that 21% of them had not had an updated condition assessment in the
Yeah.
last 5 years. Can you say, based on the last available condition assessment, what kind of shape those schools might be in now?
So there is a process. Every 5 years, they're trying to get the facility condition assessments done on each and every school, and they have been making some headway. But there are a number where the 5-year point is overdue. It's important to point out that it's not a safety issue for the children in these schools. It's mainly a tool to use for school capital planning. And they do commit, based on our recommendation, to getting caught up on those.
If
Do
there
you have a
was-
list of, sorry,
That's okay. Well, I'm just wondering, the province's response on that was unclear to me exactly what they're doing on updating those facility assessments. Like, have they yet caught up, or they are still working on it? Can you interpret that response a little bit?
So when, also in the report, we talk about how they've increased the annual repair and maintenance spend from 6 million a year to 30 million. When the work is being done, they do update the inventory for the school as to what work is done. So we did find evidence that they are updating that, but it's the full facility condition assessment that is to be done every 5 years. And they are not quite caught up, but that's going to be done.
Do you have a list of the schools that were assessed as critical?
I would point you to the department for that list.
Is it in the public domain right now, as far as you know?
I'm not sure, no, I guess not.
Yeah, and they're all in the HRCE, is that, do I remember that right from the report? Most of them are in the HRCE?
There's a chart in the report where I think they are all in HRCE.
What does that
It
tell
is
you,
in
what does that tell you, the fact that, the critical schools are all in the HRCE, and yet the government in 2023 chose 4 sites outside of HRCE to build these schools?
Well, I guess you're assuming that if it's a critical condition school, it's the highest priority on the list.
Yeah, I guess I am assuming that, should I not assume that?
I'm not sure that you can make that correlation because there are so many factors that go into play. Yeah.
Okay. You said earlier that 2022-23 there were 11 schools assessed as medium priority, and 2 of them were chosen. Which 2?
I don't say that in the report. So that was a judgment call as to whether or not we would name all of these schools. We decided to focus on the process and coming up with a recommendation to address what we found. So it doesn't, yes, it matters which schools, but the point is there were 11 categorized as medium, but only 2 were put forward, and they couldn't answer the question, why these 2? What about the other 9?
If we could see those 2, it might allow Nova Scotians to draw a conclusion about whether or not there was political interference.
Right. So
Yeah.
the department would offer you which ones.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'm not counting on that. Also, I think in your report you mentioned that about those schools that are going in Halifax. There were 2 announced earlier this year, and what's it say? By comparison, let's see. 2 school locations that were approved in February 2025. One was further along in the development process than other schools that have been announced earlier. Do you know which one of those was further along? There was Bedford and there was Dartmouth.
Not right offhand, but we might be able to get the answer to that before you leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you say that the province build schools in HRCE different than the order requested by HRCE. Did the province end up getting all of the schools that HRCE wanted, just in a different order that they desired them?
Correct, yeah. It was 4 decided from the list of 6 in a different order than what the HRCE put forward, but eventually all 6 were approved.
And just back to the 2023 announcement of those 4 schools, that the province was gonna go ahead with outside of, HRM. Do you have any evidence that those decisions were, that those were the priorities? Those were the schools with the most need?
So when that announcement was made, they hadn't decided which schools or where the locations would be. It was just, we've got 7 areas of growth, 4 schools, we'll announce it. And it was well over a year later when they identified the locations, and that followed a submission from the Regional Centers for Excellence as to where the schools should be.
And around the same time, the province also announced that they were going to build 4 replacement schools outside of, well, I guess one was within HRM, it was Elsa's House School. Did you see any evidence that those 4 schools outside were, that they had followed any criteria to choose those schools?
So I'm not following all the schools.
Sorry, I believe in 2023 the province announced that it was going to name 4 schools
Yes.
within HRCE, and they did that a year later, as you just mentioned.
Right.
But they also announced that there were 4 schools that they
Replacement
were going to
schools.
go ahead with. One was in West Hants, I forget where all of them were. One was in perhaps in West Chesnut. Anyway, they all went into toward ridings, and that was written out at the time.
See, I haven't done that, mapping it out by writing. I'm neutral.
Okay, yes, yeah, but I'm just wondering.
We're focused on the process.
I'm wondering if those 4 that were announced, if the province could produce evidence that it had chosen schools according to objective criteria.
No, we were told there was no support for why the 4, and, yeah.
Great.
If they were replacement, you're talking about replacement.
Oh, so for the replacement schools, there were submissions put forward by the Regional
Yes, yeah.
Center for Education.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Excellent. We will be back in the fall. There are about half a dozen audits underway currently, and we'll start rolling them out after the summer break, so I'm sure we'll see you back here, and we might even have the room configured differently at that time. You never know.